Welcome to Dr. Z PhD Interviews, the place where I interview people who are interesting, inspiring, or boss. And today's special guest is Shannon Simon. Shannon is a comforting vegan, and we'll find out what that means. She's also a pagan and a plant lover. Shannon, welcome to the show. And I'm so grateful to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited to kind of be talking to you and doing an interview. I really like what you're doing with this. And I love all your videos. I don't watch them all, but I love the ones that I have watched. They get straight to the point, which is very much you. So thank you very much.
It is very much me. Thank you so much for joining. For starters, I'd love to hear a little bit more about yourself. This is where you can share as much or as little about yourself, where you come from, what your background is like.
Okay, so my name is Shannon Simon, and that's what I go by. I'm a level 45 human. I'm a trans woman, and let's see, I'm married. I've been married for 13 years to my beautiful and wonderful wife, Magdalena. I have 2 adult children that live with us right now. They're like 19 and 20. 3 cats and 1 dog. And my mother-in-law, who's wonderful to have here. Let's see, we live in Los Angeles. We lived here for about 10 years. I was born and raised in Southern California, so right around here. I spend a lot of my time, well, at work, of course, at the Suicide Prevention Center. And I've been there since 2013. I started as a volunteer. In the past, I've also been a photographer. I also worked in parts logistics for Volkswagen of America for like 10 years. I've done a lot of different things. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay.
Although I did want to pause kind of early on because I was thinking about this, and like I set up the lights and I put on some makeup and I was like, oh, okay, I look pretty presentable right now. This is good.
You look great.
And I started transitioning like 4 years ago. And I don't want to make this about surgeries and all those other kind of things, like where like, so outside of like the trans community, I don't want to make this just about, you know, how we present to the world and all the things we've done. But I very much want to talk to all the trans people out there. So if you're cis, I want you to mute this just for a minute, okay? So just mute it. I'll give you a little peace sign when you're able to come back. And to my brothers and sisters, to my trans brothers and sisters, especially the trans femme ones, I just want to say I've been on hormones for 4 years, and like this and how I look right now, I didn't think that was something that I could accomplish. I didn't think that was a place that I could get to. But it's not just hormones. This is 2.5 years of getting zapped and electrolysis, and this is facial feminization surgery, and this is some other thing, like very major things that went into, you know, helping me present and be reflected in the way I want to reflect. And so regardless of where you're at, especially if you're starting out right now, I don't want you to watch some of these things and be like, oh, it's only been a few years for this person, and somehow that they're amazing and I'm never going to be like that. I'm never going to look like that. It feels impossible in the beginning, but I want you to know it's not. It's a ton of work, and I'm sure you'll find that out. And to those of you that have been doing it for a while, you know. But I want you to know this is a lot of work, and surgeries and all of those other things. So please know that you're valid even without those. And anyway, that's what I wanted to say. So the cis people can come back now.
I really hope cis people watch that too, because cis people also need to understand that transition is not something that happens overnight, and it's not an easy path. It is a difficult path in so many different ways. Every time I have a cis person who tells me that people make this by choice, I just really want to offer them an hour electrolysis that I'm willing to pay for them to go and try it out and tell me how much of a choice it is. But since you started for sharing this, I'd love to dive deeper. And I appreciate you being transparent and saying that it's been 4 years and there has been challenges. It has not been easy. Clearly, a lot went into it, not just hormones. You shared that you had facial feminization surgery, many hours of electrolysis, a lot of other things went into it. How, in the beginning, before when you started, how much did you not really believe that it was even possible for yourself personally?
So I think that held me back for a long time. I kind of had the realization and kind of came to that point years before I started transitioning, after really like pushing back against that for a very long time. And that's really how I started out. I started out in that place where, I'm not a guy, and I'm just gonna, start stepping away from that as much as I can. And wherever I end up and whatever happens, and any point that it doesn't feel comfortable anymore, I'm just gonna stop. And so,
Okay.
yes, there you go.
What was there a lot of fear that you're just never going to make it? Was there a lot of fear that you may not achieve the looks that you desire? Was that ever a fear, or was it just something that was looming in the back of your head, but you knew that with access to certain things, you're able to achieve it?
So yeah, it was a fear, but it wasn't so much a fear about how I want to look. I mean, of course, like everyone who starts this journey is like, I want to be young and beautiful. And I didn't start transitioning until I was 41 years old. I had a lot of testosterone sit in, and really, I was set. And it was one of those things where it wasn't so much about looking beautiful. It was a lot more about just being reflected as who I am. And I just didn't want to look masculine. And even when I had things done, I was very specific. I'm like, I just want to soften things. I don't want to look like another person. I just don't want to look like a masculine version of myself. And I'm really happy with how that turned out. I'm very, very well surprised and grateful to my surgeons, and yeah, so
You look
shout out to
beautiful.
them.
You look definitely beautiful and stunning, and way younger than your age presentation now that you shared when you started. It made it quite easy to calculate your age. You look amazing for your age too. And it sounds like setting a realistic expectations and not really having a very high bar was very helpful for you in the beginning.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to be reflected correctly. And I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, in the beginning, it's as much, and you know this, but to everyone else out there, it's as much about safety as it is about
Right.
actually looking and being reflected. When you are, noticeably trans, you attract a lot of negative attention from um
From just
from
anybody out there, really.
yeah, from just about everything. So, and I
Yeah.
think my name just popped up. Sorry.
That's okay. So diving into what you do, I know that you work at the Pseudocide prevention hotline, and that what is that? What is that even like? That's got to be incredibly emotionally difficult work to do. What is that work like for you?
Um, well, it's been a journey. I can definitely say. I started there in 2013 as a volunteer, which was an incredibly hard year for me. That year, my father died. A judge allowed my ex to take my kids, much further away, so I didn't get to see them. My dysphoria was probably the highest it's ever been before. And at that same time, I'm like, I'm going to volunteer. And I I wanted to give back. I wanted to actually do something other than be focused on myself. But I didn't like doing manual labor or reading to kids or anything like that. And suicide was really right up my alley. And
How
because it's
so?
some, what's that?
How so? You mentioned that suicide was really up your alley. How so? In what way?
Well, it's kind of the thing that drew me to, being able to talk to people about it. And I've dealt with depression most of my life for lots of different reasons. And and feeling suicidal, and like that's come up a lot. And I've had a lot of friends and family who have also dealt with that. I've had losses in my life from people who have died, and so it was about something very close to my heart, and yeah, so that's what got me into it, and it seemed a little daunting at first, although I have to say that 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 being there is probably one of the best choices I've ever made. I mean, transitioning is probably top of my list. Well, maybe getting married. I don't know. There's a lot of things, but um, but yeah, it was really wonderful to go there. When I started, I was awful. I wasn't a good counselor at all. My heart was in the right place. You know, I knew what was going on. I think even when I started, I was feeling suicidal myself, so I was right there.
Oh,
Which I know it's not the best.
that's what I wanted to ask you, because you said you started to suicide, working at the suicide prevention line before you started your transition, when you were still struggling so much with severe dysphoria. I just can't imagine struggling so much with dysphoria and then going and work and contribute to a place where people are calling you whether they're pretty much and. Did that not exasperate dysphoria for you at all?
So no, my dysphoria didn't kick up when I was there, and when I started as a volunteer, and volunteers work about 4 hours a week, one shift a week for a year, and that's what I was doing. So for those 4 hours, I would talk to people who were feeling suicidal, and or going through crisis, or just needing an ear, or feeling lonely, or any of those things. And there's something about, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this, that even when you're going through things, when you can connect with somebody in a very real way about their issues and help them, that helps you too. It really does. Doing this, it can be emotionally tiresome sometimes. It can, but the benefits I've gotten from from the people that also do this, volunteer to do this kind of work, who are the most amazing ever. Seriously, they're the least judgmental, the most caring. I mean, it's crazy to be surrounded by a group of people who really know how to listen. And I mean, you can't fake anything with them. You walk in and you're not feeling well, they're going to be like, "Are you okay?" And but being in that kind of environment, and then also helping people and holding space, that really feeds your soul in a way that I don't think a lot of other things do. And I think sometimes, when you have dysphoria, or these other things going on in your life, or these other deep things that you're dealing with, sometimes the more you're in them and the more you focus on them, just the bigger and more out of control they get. It's really, there's a lot to be said for helping someone else for no reason, for no payment, for just being there for someone. That is really, well, it's really life-giving for also the person who's helping. I personally, I see it as a gift when somebody calls and somebody opens up and somebody's real. And I think that's a gift. That's a gift that you give to to the person who's helping you, because they get to be with you in that moment, and that's a vulnerable space.
I agree. There's something about being needed and being able to help somebody in the need that tends to kind of spike up care for yourself and value for yourself. Now, you've been doing the Pseudocide line for how many years now?
So I started in 2013, and when I first started, like I said, it was like 4 hours a week. Gosh, I don't know. You're going to make me do math. Don't make me do math.
So we're talking about 8 years here of working at Pseudocide Hotline. In those years, how often would you say you get callers who call in and they're very honest about struggling with gender dysphoria and struggling as a result with suicidal ideation as a byproduct of it?
So I think a better measure, sorry, just to go back to the other question for a second, a better measure is I just reached 10,000 hours on the lines, which I'm very proud of. And so that's a better measure than years, in my opinion. But when it comes to trans folks calling the line, there are quite a few trans people who call. And before I talk about it, I want to point something out that, okay, so I want to point something out that one of my colleagues made a really good point with. Her name is Courtney, Courtney Cruz. She's amazing. And that a lot of with trans, with the LGBT community, that's not what makes you suicidal. Being
Right.
trans or being gay or whatever that is, that doesn't mean you're suicidal. That doesn't make you suicidal. It's really about if you're accepted, if the people around you accept you, if you know the society you're in, how they look at you and how they treat you. It's those reactions those negative reactions and that lack of
Accepting
lack
the
of acceptance.
societal pressures, the societal pressures, lack of support,
Right.
lack of being
That's
seen, lack of being accepted and validated. I completely agree. I'm glad that you clarified that, because I think that a lot of, well, not a lot, but sometimes people will listen differently to things. And sometimes when people hear things in terms of pseudocide and linked to gender dysphoria or trans people, they associate that, you know, transgender people are suicidal individuals, and that's not true. You know, gender dysphoria does not cause suicide. It's a lack of access to care, access to support, societal stigma, all of the things. So I'm glad you clarified.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important because there are statistics and they're like, well, most of trans people have felt suicidal and this many have tried and, you know, this many have succeeded. And those things are true, but it's not because of being trans.
Right.
So anyway, to go back, yes, of course, I've definitely personally talked to and helped other counselors talk to other trans folks. And it's a very hard thing to deal with and to cope with, whether it's dysphoria or not being seen correctly or being assaulted, or a lot of it comes in the very beginning when you're struggling to find who you are, and who you are isn't what other people want, and you know your family's not accepting by what they've said or how they act or how they treat other people, or and I just want to say this, and I talked to actually quite a few parents too. Just be careful what you say and how you act when you're at home with your kids. And because if you're, you know, very, very pressing hard and very non-accepting of trans or LGBT in general, your kids are hearing that, and there's a chance, there's actually a much higher chance, but there's a chance that your kids are dealing with that, and they will be completely afraid to come out, and they will be afraid that, you know, they will know that you don't love them, or that's what they will think. And I just want you to be really aware and really conscious and really careful with that. So yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because I can't tell you how many times I heard, actually, I heard adults, because I worked with adults, not kids, but when I encourage adults to come out as a loved ones, I had so many times where people tell me, there's no way my family or my sister or my father, my mom are going to accept me, because I've heard how they speak about transgender people out there, especially the more and more we get transgender people holding government offices, since it's something is out in the public and in the news. A lot more people are talking about it. So I agree with you. I think we have to be all mindful and careful about what we say and how we say it. Now, you are also a comforting vegan and a pagan.
True.
So talk to me a little bit more about those two.
Okay. So seriously, another subject I could literally talk for hours on, either one of those. Well, at least the veganism for sure. So the story for me is that, well, I've been vegan for about 10 years now. It started more as a health thing. I was having a ton of sinus issues, like extreme sinus issues, where, I mean, I seriously couldn't get within 10 feet of like some star jasmine or some cut grass before I would start, you know, breaking out, and, you know, my nose would go crazy, and I was living on antihistamines, and those just made me grumpy.
Very severe, yeah.
And I remember there was a doctor when I was young that suggested going off dairy, and so I did that. I did that for about a month. And all of my sinus issues went away. Literally everything that caused a reaction went away from me. And so I could stick one of those star jasmines like right up my nose and nothing would happen. I tried it too, and I'm like, oh wow, this is amazing. And that was kind of the beginning. And once I did that, and my wife Magdalena had been thinking about going vegan for a while, for more ethical purposes, or for more ethical reasons, and that was the beginning. And I cut that out. I felt so much better. We cut out meat, and my digestion issues went away, and I had more energy, and I felt so much better. And it was probably a year and a half or 2 years before I saw like one of those fully roasted pigs, like somebody brings out of the ground and takes a picture of on Instagram, of course. And I was just, it broke my heart. I like saw that and I was like, oh,
yeah,
because that point, like I'd grown up most of my life, of course, eating meat and liking the taste of meat and all of these things, and really was disconnected from the fact that, this is a loving, this is a sentient, smart animal. This, just like for a lot of Americans, if we saw like a fully roasted dog, we're sad and we're outraged, and how could they do that? But
cows and pigs, we depersonalize, and
but they're the same. They're as intelligent. They build those bonds. They know who you are. They're cuddly. They do all those things too, and they also have a right to be alive. And I think living in the society that we do, we have so much food. I mean, you can go to any market, you can get more than enough things to sustain yourself. You're not on some desert island where you have to eat something like that. And it's really easy to nourish yourself in a very, very, conscious way.
Right. And there's a lot of variety out there.
There is. Well, and there's so many products now that really support this kind of a diet. Not all of them are healthy per se, but they're out there, and a lot of them taste way amazing. 10 years ago, a lot of this stuff tasted horrible.
I gotta say, your Instagram on this is very salivating, appetite infusing. Every time I look through Instagram, I drool. You post, and I will share, if you're okay with it, I'll share your Instagram handle with people who are maybe aspiring vegans or vegans, because the pictures, the photos that you take are just something. I mean, there's photographs of vegan burgers and vegan hot dogs and vegan, you just name it. And every time I see it, there's no ways that I'm looking at something that is vegan, but it is. And I bet it is also delicious.
It is. And I really love food. I love to eat. It's one of my favorite things to do, is find a new restaurant or find a new thing to make or find a new mushroom to figure out how to cook. And it's so great. It really, actually going vegan really opened up my need to like taste foods and try foods and cook foods, and like just opened me up in a way that like I don't think I ever really enjoyed food before that. So yeah, totally check out Instagram. When I started my Instagram years ago, the vegan community was pretty small, and it's really awesome to see how much it's grown and how many people are, trying things out or being vegan part-time or being vegan full-time. I highly recommend, especially if you're like in Los Angeles or some of the major cities, there's amazing food out there, amazing. So yeah, so that was my vegan journey. So now I consider myself an ethical vegan, and the more you look into it, the more there's just endless amounts of reasons to actually change your diet. It's one of the biggest ways you can infect the environment. There's some really legit reasons. So.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't be surprised if there's also a link between a healthier, cleaner diet. Clearly, it's documented that it affects, just like you pointed out right now, it affects your overall system, your digestive tract, and it's also, I bet, affects your endocrine system as well. And so for individuals who are on HRT, that might just actually, have probably a world of benefits as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's also a link in that as well.
Yeah, me either. There is a place, and I mean, I don't know them personally or anything, but but I've been getting information, nutritional information from them for years. It's called nutritionfacts.org. It's put on by Dr. Greger, who's a nutritional doctor, and he basically reviews studies and puts them in layman's terms. And he has a whole crew of people who do that now, and really, really good information. I think personally, you should start with the science the best you can, and then figure out what works for you.
Mhm.
And that's a really, really good place to start when it comes to any questions you have about, is this good for me? Is that good for me? Are there studies that actually, what do they actually say? So I would say start there.
Well, we know that everything is a holistic approach. Hopefully, ideally, you want the holistic approach. And when your body is stressed, when your body is under pressure, when your body does not really metabolize food well, that's going to affect how you're going to feel emotionally. And sometimes people will tell me that they feel really emotionally out of whack, and they attribute it to their hormones. And they're wondering if their hormones are working properly or if their dose is proper. And sometimes it's just a matter of you're stressed, you're not eating well, you're not getting enough sleep. So I think overall holistic approach is very important. You're also a pagan. So share, for those who are watching and don't know what it is, and I know that a pagan and paganism has so many different meaning, and everybody has their own understanding of it. What is pagan and paganism means to you?
Um, so I'll give a little bit of my understanding of a definition first. And paganism has kind of become this umbrella term for any of the earth religions, any of the religions that maybe closer to the indigenous or religions
Mhm.
of any particular place in the world. I didn't start on particular. Pagan has kind of taken like a more European approach, is kind of how it goes there. In other places, it's called shamanism, or
Mm.
this or that or the other. They're basically the same kind of thing when you're talking in umbrella terms. Um, and I actually started out, doing some healing ceremonies that I would call more, pretty open. And it began from there. It began from really having that opening me up in a very particular way. I was raised Christian, and that created that didn't resonate with me. I learned a
Mhm.
lot about it. I tried very hard, but it had a lot of unanswered questions. So via actually Buddhism and then paganism is what I went into, or what I went into next, and I kind of decided from there um, to go back and look at what my actual roots were. I'm, well, I mean, I'm from here, a couple of generations. My ancestors are from Scotland and Germany and England, and in kind of
Mm.
that area of the world. So I started researching there and found some things that felt really good. It feels really, really amazing to be around people that are like-minded, doing rituals, and especially doing rituals with
Mhm.
my family. Feel really amazing. I love this whole idea, and this is kind of an earth religion thing, is it's very tangible. Like a lot of religions, they expect you to just believe things without evidence, and they call it faith. And that's fine, that's great. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. But the thing about a lot of the pagan and earth religions are more, like I said, they're more tangible.
Mhm.
It's your connection to the environment around you.
Right.
It's you being in tune with your feelings. It's you, being aware of what's going on. And there's lots of different ways that people practice. There's no wrong way to do these things. It's really one of those things that you feel out for yourself. It's incredibly empowering, and there's so many different directions. I
Yeah.
mean, paganism is such a broad
I
term.
agree. It's very, very broad. And what's interesting about paganism is that I actually find quite a few people who shift to paganism, especially transgender identified, because they don't feel like they find belonging or a place in other forms of religion, more like standardized religions, I should say, Christianity, Catholicism, with so on. So they don't really find that there's a placement for them there, just because a lot of those places, not a lot is probably a little overstretched, but a significant amount of them do not acknowledge transgender experience. And so a lot of people tend to switch to paganism or other form of plant-based Mother Earth type of spirituality.
Mhm.
You were pagan before you even embarked on your transition, correct?
Yes. So that was its own journey. Like I said, I started out Christian. In high school, I ran Christians on campus. I was very committed. I did all of those things. And at the end of my first long-term relationship, which was about 10 years, it just didn't work. It wasn't working. It just didn't make sense to me. I knew what all the answers were, and it wasn't enough. And I actually, at that time, I very much, I wanted to, I'm like, I want to be happy. And I had an experience years ago on the campus of Fullerton University, where I had met a Buddhist nun, and it was the first time I had ever been around someone who just emanated this peace. Like, just being close to them was like, you know, jarring, but like in a very calming way. I had never experienced that before. And so that's actually where I started. I started my path of, learning, a little bit about, Buddhism, and I practiced with some some Chan Buddhist nuns who taught me how to meditate. And then I did Vipassana. I did a few of those courses. They're like 10 days, a good 100 hours of meditation at a time.
Oh my God, that's
And
incredible.
that was really an amazing experience. And I highly recommend that if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in. It's very low belief. There aren't a lot of stories associated with it. It's really just the practice of in this case with Vipassana, just, being present and being aware of your senses. And it's, like I said, it really fits any belief set, but it very much puts you in your body. And actually, honestly, that's, on I've done two of those courses. On one of those courses, well, on both of them really, is where a lot of these issues came up for me in a very strong way the first time, where because that's one of those things that happens. You have like these elated moments where you just feel amazing for no reason, just because you're in touch with yourself. But you also have these, dark nights where things are coming out of you, and they want to be dealt with. And you're like, what is this? I've hidden this away. I've tucked this away for so long. And, and that comes up too. They can be they're very difficult, highly worthwhile. But
that's what I wanted to ask, because you were a pagan or practicing paganism prior to your transition. And my understanding is that that really helps you to connect much more to your body and get much more grounded. And as we know, people who are struggling with gender dysphoria tend to a lot of times lack that connection to their body. In fact, a lot of people tend to dissociate in order not to deal with their body, because the body is not in alignment with their innate gender. And you said that was part of you waking up to some of the things that was going on within you, but do you find that that also helps you to be more grounded and more connected to yourself versus less grounded and more disconnected to yourself as you went along?
So yeah, but I'm going to go a little bit further and say that that I like paganism. That was a choice for me. I did some yoga, I did some Kundalini, I did some Buddhism, I did some of these things, and the thing that resonated with me the most was paganism, and like I said, the rituals and the practices and the people, and there's a very kind of a free, a free feeling to it.
Yeah.
But all of these things, they all have an aspect where you ground, where you center yourself, where where you learn how to breathe, where you learn how to be aware of yourself, where you learn how to clear out your emotions. And I think that's really important. In any place, like in my personal practice is like this eclectic mix of literally everything I've tried that has worked for me. And so find the things that work for you. And I would definitely suggest, starting with some stretching. Your body, a lot of times when we're having dysphoria, or we're having depression, or we're having anxiety, we tend to try to focus, we try to use our brains to get out of it. And it doesn't work. It
Right.
just doesn't. You can't think yourself out of those things. The easiest thing for you to do is to actually to use your body. And whether that's breathing, that's something that you can focus on, that's physical, or that's positioning your body differently, or going for a walk, or doing something physical, because that is so much easier to deal with and control than your thoughts. You're not going to be able to straighten them out when you're feeling like this. And so any one of those things that works for you, I highly recommend. So
I appreciate you elaborating more on that. I think connecting to the body is very, very important. It can really help people later on in transition as well, as they connect now to their newly found, newly evolved type of body. Now, let's talk a little bit about your marriage. You mentioned that you and Magdalena have been together since 2008, so that's 13 years. And I know that you just recently had your anniversary. Congratulations. 13 years is great. Yeah, that's a long time to be together. I'm really happy for both of you. Tell me a little bit more about your marriage, a little bit more about your relationship. Obviously, you're welcome to share whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
So let me start by saying we've been married for 13 years. Our anniversary was on the 8th of August, 8/8/08. And we've been together a total of 16 years. She's an amazing woman. I'm so lucky and blessed to have her in my life. She's very tenacious. She's, literally the person who's taught me how to be present, and how to argue, and how to stand up for yourself, and how to not be afraid of conflict. And her family is very close and very loving, and they can argue and then still love each other. And those aren't things that I grew up with knowing how to do. I can honestly say I didn't know myself when I was younger. I didn't have good, role models. I wasn't really connected to my family. And she's been the one that has really just been there to help me through all those things. And I am incredibly grateful for her. I honestly have no idea why she stayed this long.
She loves you. Clearly,
I know,
love is holding the two of you together, apart from the two of you being soulmates.
I am not easy. I am like a full-time job. I'm a little bit of a drama queen, a little bit of a diva, but no, and that's always been the case. But no, she's been amazing, and I mean, it goes a really long way. So anyway, I think I lost track of your question and all that.
No, you didn't. You answered it beautifully. Was it hard for you to come out to Magdalena?
Yes. And it wasn't anything to do with her. It really was just to do with me. I spent most of my life navigating my life, not being honest and not being true to myself or anyone else. All of my thoughts and all of my ways of being in the world were very much about controlling outcomes, and controlling what was going to happen, and thinking ahead. And that puts you in a place where you don't really even know who you are. You're more concerned about what's going on. You're more concerned about control. And I won't go into all the reasons for that. There's a lot of reasons for that. But she really helped me with that, because she's always honest, and she always has left space to be honest, whether it's good or bad or whatever else it is. And I've always had fears, growing up, even beyond the trans thing, of like, if this person knows this about me, they're not going to love me, or they're not going to care about me, or they're going to leave, or whatever that is. So yeah, so I learned a lot through this whole journey. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times people, and I see this now I've done several of these interviews. A lot of people are still in relationship with the people that were together prior to transition, and that is the biggest fear, is how the person is going to react. And it seems like a lot of people are, regarding of their feelings or difficulties that they face, they still maintain relationship and stay in relationship. And you and Magdalena are clearly one of those cases.
Yeah, because I know you asked how I actually came out. I came out in 2013 to her. Um, and honestly, I don't think I'd really put everything together before that time. It was just a whole mix of, you know, always hating my body, always hating
Mhm.
myself, not wanting to be masculine, not being okay with sex. There was like all of these things that made me incredibly difficult to be in a relationship with. Um, and and honestly, I can't say that, oh, I said, oh, hey, this is how I came out and this is who I am. I didn't do that. I was
Mhm.
freaking out. My dysphoria was crazy. And I thought, okay, I need help. And I reached out to a trans woman in the UK, and she gave me some tips, and I sought out a therapist, Elise, over in LA and in West LA, and she's amazing. I love her, I adore her.
Alice is great, yes.
And it was my wife finding one of those cards from the gender center over there,
Oh,
and she's like, what is this? And I was like, mortified, because I was afraid, and it's taken me a long time to open up about so many things, and especially this one. And so I kind of came out by default, and I don't recommend that. I recommend you just being honest with your person.
mm,
um, but that wasn't something that I was able to do. So that was really difficult in the beginning. Um, Having a therapist to
yeah.
help me out and to help us out with that was imperative. So if you're going down this journey, if you're trying to figure things out, if you're in a relationship and you want to know how to come out and you want to have some safety around that, I highly recommend getting professional help. It's incredibly important.
I agree. So coming out by default, how did Magdalena react? What was her reaction?
Um, so a lot of this is a blur to me now. We would have to ask her. I'm sure we could if we really wanted to. Um, I think a lot of it was surprise and just like wondering what's going on.
Mhm.
And 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 I know with us, and I'm guessing with a lot of couples, where when you're trans and you hide these things and these aren't public, and you really are hiding a really big part of yourself from someone, because you're not comfortable, or you can't, or you're afraid, or it's tucked too deep inside, or you don't even know what it is or how to deal with it. And it's a big piece. And I think there was a little bit there of, oh, well, why didn't you share this with me? And why didn't we talk about this,
Mhm.
and all of those things. So on one hand, it's completely scary, and on the other hand, to have somebody who actually loves you, who's like, no, you can tell me these things, I want to know these things about
Mhm.
you. um, it's also incredibly validating. And yeah, at that time I didn't do anything other than I started going by Shannon, as opposed to the other name that I had before. Shannon has always been my middle name. I actually went by that for years when I was younger. Um, and it was just this softening of having to be masculine after that. It wasn't, there wasn't even a lot of talk after that initial where I got to, and a big thing for me, and maybe this has to do with my generation or whatever, was Kate Bornstein's books. I read one
Mhm.
of her books and
Gender outlaws. Mhm.
did her workbook, and I was
Mhm.
like, it was just such a relief to like be like, oh, this makes so much sense, and
Mhm.
oh, there's other options, and oh, this is, there's all these like different scales of how you can be in
Mhm.
different situations and where you land. And it was just such a relief at the time. It really allowed me to just kind of relax and start to come more into myself. And of course, it took me another 4 years before I actually transitioned.
So it sounds from what you're sharing that your marriage prior to coming out was already solid and strong, and there was a lot of emotional traction there. How much of that do you think actually helped contribute to Magdalena's, I don't want to say acceptance doesn't sound right, but to Magdalena overall feelings that she can be here with you for your own personal evolution? How much of that do you think contributed?
Well, I would say it contributed a lot, and probably a lot to the success I've had as a person and transitioning. I mean, I'm just going to be honest here. I mean, I look like I have it together, you know, for a lot from the outside, from the Instagram, you know, social media version. But I would say it's definitely more like 90% her and like 10% me. I really struggled with depression. I really struggled with, dysphoria. I really struggled in a lot of different ways. And, she, decided, I love you. And that was it. There's nothing else. I mean, and of all the things that have happened and okay, so this is how I kind of learned this, because I didn't think this in the beginning of the relationship. I was always like, anytime there was an argument or something went wrong, I was like, this is her fault. It's not my fault. She did this wrong and she said this wrong, whatever the case was. And then shortly after, and I did a lot of things to help myself. That's why I did all this meditation and all these ceremonies and all these other things, because I was trying to be okay. But when I started hormones, and this isn't the case for everyone, and they don't fix everything, but starting hormones for me was huge.
Yeah.
Really huge as far as me emotionally. I like to use this kind of, just example, in my head. Before, I felt like, I was like this little pebble on the beach, and every time a wave would come, it would just toss me. I don't know where I'd end up. And sometimes I'd be buried, and sometimes I'd be all over the place. And then once I actually started hormones, once I started transitioning, I didn't feel like the pebble anymore. I felt like that big, huge rock on the beach.
Beautiful analogy.
Yeah, those waves would still hit me and they would still sting. And yeah, eventually it's gonna smooth me out and I won't be there. But I was grounded and I was stable in a way.
And in control of your life, starting to take control of your life.
Yes, and in a way that never happened before. And when I started doing that, my relationship got a lot better because I felt better and I felt more congruent. And so that was amazing and I loved it. And at the same time, the realization there is, oh, it was probably me. So there you go. I'm not that tenacious. I have a tendency to give up, and no, she's literally the rock. I'm so grateful for her.
I love how you talk about her. I love how much you attribute to Magdalena. I think that's beautiful when we elevate our partners. I'm going to go into a little bit more intimate topic here, if I may. A lot of people are curious about us, and I think it's normal and healthy curiosity. And the curiosity is whether for you yourself, you were attracted to women, obviously in the beginning because you're with Magdalena. Has that changed for you at all? And for Magdalena as well, was she attracted to any particular gender expression? And has that changed at all as a result of you transitioning?
So yeah, there have been some changes. I think growing up, I had a very strong Christian upbringing. You were only allowed to like the opposite sex, and you were a boy and you were supposed to like girls. I did. I definitely was attracted to women. And I want to start by saying I consider myself a Magdalena sexual, which is exclusive.
I love that.
So there you go. That's my functional sexuality.
Beautiful.
When it comes to the non-functional sexuality, I would definitely say that I'm pansexual now. Starting in 2013 and definitely taking off as I transitioned. My sexuality, I wouldn't say that it changed. I'm still very attracted to, all the same things that I was before, and all the same people and the very feminine aspects. But as I transitioned, that grew. So my capacity, for attraction was here, and now it's like here. and the things that I'm attracted to are much larger now. And it's, includes more masculinity, but in a very strange way, my tolerance for masculinity is much lower than it ever has been before. And at the same time, it's kind of shocking how it makes me feel occasionally. But yeah, so that's opened up. So there aren't, like, as soon as I let down having to uphold those rules, like my brain was like, oh, well, this person's really amazing, or this person's incredibly funny, or, oh, did you hear their voice? And, oh, so there was all these things that that just feel nice, and they feel good, and they feel natural. And yeah, so I've had an opening all the way around. So
okay. And I see that happens a lot for people, and I wonder how much of evolving through your own gender, right, a lot of times happens to broaden just that internal paradigm across the board, not only in relationship to gender, but also in relationship to how we connect to other people. In terms of Magdalena, what about her? Can you speak a little bit, or maybe share a little bit about whether her sexual orientation has changed, or where's the challenges that she had to confront herself in terms of now being in a relationship with a woman?
So I can't speak for her. She would have to speak for herself. Luckily, she still finds me attractive. She still wants to be with me. She always says wonderful, beautiful things about me. She's more affectionate, and that probably has to do with me, than she's ever been before. And our relationship is so much better than it ever has been before. And that's really something you would have to talk to her about. I mean, she's definitely, in a lesbian relationship now. And I think that she considers herself bisexual. But yeah, I think the most important part is that I feel loved, I feel desired, and she makes me feel that way.
I love that answer. I appreciate you being able to respect her, not speaking in her voice, but yet giving us a little bit of, at least for those who are so worried about those aspects of relationship, a little bit more insight, and yet also maintaining her privacy. I really appreciate that. Has the power dynamic at all changed in your relationship now that there's two women?
So yeah, there's a lot of things that have changed, and it's kind of hard for me to put my finger on
what exactly it is, whether it's power dynamic or just you being more open, more comfortable with yourself, more connected to Magdalena in a different way.
Yeah, it's really hard to say which one of those things that it is, but our relationship has changed quite a bit. I'll be honest, this journey, and a big part of this journey is actually talking to people, and being on the hotline and hearing so many stories, and really being empathetic and learning those skills and boundaries and not personalizing things, along with, for me, estrogen has made me incredibly sensitive. I've become so much more sensitive to absolutely everything, whether it's touch or smell, but most certainly the emotional things. And I feel, and I think I've heard this before, and it kind of resonates with me, although it's a little gross. But before, I was like emotionally constipated all the time, and just nothing was really happening. But now, I'm regular, and I'm free, and everything flows, and everything works the way it's supposed to. And when that happens, you're able to connect in a way that is just so much deeper. And on top of that, to be accepted through, oh gosh, all the things in our relationship. And we've been through a lot, me being trans was just a part of that.
Oh, I'm sure if you got together for a ride, and I'm actually, you and I share that I've been 16 years with my partner. I know that the success of 16 years does not come without being through a lot together. And it is challenging, and it does take a lot of work. Shifting gears to kids, you mentioned you have two kids, 19 and 20. What was it like for you coming out to them? Was there anything that you were particularly really afraid of? Was it difficult? Was it challenging? What was the process like?
It wasn't I didn't come out to my kids until probably a little while after I started hormones. And at the time, my oldest was living with us. Their name is Nim. And I don't know, you know what, this kind of like is one of those things where, because we were talking about this earlier, and we've never really stuck very hard to gender roles. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll just give an example, because we were talking about this the other day. Like we would play the game of life with them, where you have the little
Mm-hmm.
car, and there's pink pegs and there's blue pegs that you
Yeah.
put in the car, and you go around the thing. And when we would play, you could pick any peg you want. And if you wanted to change your peg halfway through, great. If you wanted to marry the same color peg, great. And I don't know, I think it was just those kinds of things that like there wasn't a very, or I wouldn't say, or in my opinion, I mean, you would definitely have to ask them as well. There wasn't a very big focus on, this is the male role and this is the female role,
Yeah.
and this is what this person does and this is what this person does. Um, Basically, Magdalena did all of it. I didn't do much, but uh, so coming out to them, it didn't feel bad at all. It didn't actually even feel hard. I came out to my
Mm-hmm.
oldest. They were um, they were kind of, well, they are, and even then they were kind of non-binary themselves, and they came out a little bit after that to me. So it was like, and and so that was really good. My younger, he was like, okay, whatever, because he was a cool teenager. And so yeah, that was it. It was kind of a mix of happiness and a non-event, and you just go on and do your thing. And now what are we going to call you? That was kind of a thing, because I didn't particularly want to go by dad anymore. I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
other trans folks are good with some of those terms. I totally get that. I wasn't so much.
Yeah.
And we landed on DM, which is either demi mom or demi, or dungeon master or something like that. And so that's kind of what happens.
I
They will
love that.
always have their biological mom, and so I will never
Mhm.
take that role. But literally they have three moms. So what are you gonna do?
I love that. That's great. I think it's amazing how the younger generation just really so much more gender fluid in terms of their vocabulary and understanding. And a lot of times people are so terrified to come out to their teens. And I say, go for it. I guarantee you they have friends who are gender diverse, they won't bat an eyelash. And I think, in fact, that can be one of the stepping stones to feeling much more confident by coming out to your kids and feeling that acceptance you get from them. For you in your transition, what did you find was the most challenging part of your transition for yourself personally?
Hmm. There are a lot of challenging things. Ultimately, most of them turned out to be good. I think just coming to terms with what it is and having language about that was probably the biggest piece. I mean, I
Mm,
grew up with my only trans experience being Aerosmith singing "Dude Looks Like a Lady," and a lot
mm,
of these really transphobic ideas,
yeah, yeah.
and just hating myself. But there were no, like, I didn't know that trans was even an option. I didn't know that, like, I could be my true self. I didn't know that was something I could do. I just you know and it was something that went through my whole life. I hit it. It was very, very close and tight. And so I would say that was probably one of the hardest parts in coming out.
Mm.
But there's more. um so so I don't think I understood privilege before.
Mm.
um
You're talking
so
about
I
male privilege.
well, yeah, white male privilege. I and looking, at the time, I'd be like, I'm just working really hard, I'm doing the best I can, and I was. But
Mm-hmm.
looking back, I'm like, no, you had a lot of these opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
work hard and to do these things because you were a tall white male. That's part of this. It wasn't just the hard work. It was these things. And that really came to my understanding as soon as I started to transition. I
Hmm.
mean, I remember my second group meeting at the LGBT center, and coming out and walking back to my car, which was like 2 blocks away over there at the time, and having guys chase me down asking for blowjobs, and I'm like, what in the world is this? And just like being at the gas station at night and having people come up to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But even just navigating the world. Before, I would walk through the mall and I would just walk. Everyone would literally step out of my way.
Yeah, because
Everyone.
we don't really objectify and sexualize people presenting male in this world, but the minute you are a woman, yeah, you get that. I mean, just hearing that, it can be really overwhelming, a scary experience, especially if it's something clearly it was something you experienced for the first time. How did you handle that?
I cried a lot. It was well, it was really shocking, and it really brings into light, and I kind of understood a lot of things that I just hadn't understood before. When people are talking about being afraid, or women, or even people of color were talking about what it's like in the world. And because
Yeah.
there were times, especially in my early transition, where you know I wasn't I wasn't reflected correctly. And so I would get weird looks, and people wouldn't want to talk to me and wouldn't want to help me and do those things. And it took a lot of energy to actually just leave the house, and not just energy to be able to go out, but
Mhm.
very much like,
Mental energy to be in the right
yeah, it's,
headspace.
it was almost like anger. It was almost like, screw you. Actually, a little harsher. But I exist. I'm going to go out and do this.
Mhm.
I belong here. I'm allowed to take up space. And that was something that I hadn't experienced before. And I think that really, I mean, for me, and of course talking to a lot of people and hearing a lot of stories, that really opened me up to just having room and space and empathy for all of these different ways of being, whether it's whether it's being a woman, whether it's being a person of color, whether it's being someone
Mhm.
who's disabled,
Yeah.
or someone who's overweight. Like all of these things, all of these different ways of being, they really, that you really are treated differently. And when you're treated differently, it's incredibly difficult. And with each thing that you add on, it's more and more difficult. And I think a lot of times people don't understand that if they haven't experienced it.
Yeah, that's very true. And I always tell people that, in my experience, social aspect of transition can be the most challenging because you're confronted with all these nuances through which the world sees you through very gender-specific lens, and clearly you have never experienced it before. Whereas for me, for anybody who is cis, I would say you're brought up having that lens already intact, and as a result, you kind of being coached how to deal with all of the things. But when you're here, you're a mature, grown-up woman, and you confront it for the first time. That can be very terrifying. Did that? Because I would imagine the conversations you and Magdalena had about experiences you have started to experience as a woman, and I would imagine you and Magdalena getting much closer also as a result, sadly, as a result of it, because now part of you understands her and things that she went through that much better. Did that ever happen?
Yeah, no, I would say definitely. I mean, I think the bigger parts would just be, being more congruent and being happier, and having more space. And also, there's there's so much that comes from having someone accept you for who you really are, that just deepens your own feelings for them as well, and knowing that you're loved. Um, but yeah, also, being out in the world and understanding what that's actually like, and understanding, a lot of these experiences, and really just being sensitive
Mm-hmm.
on all these different levels. And so I would highly recommend to anyone, especially in hetero, relationships, especially if you're a guy, um, to very much listen to and ask, what your person is going through and what they're experiencing. And if they say that they're afraid, don't dismiss it. Ask why, and really try to understand what that means. What does that look like? And what are you afraid of? And why? And how are you trying to protect yourself? And, why do you have to make sure, it's
Exactly.
clear out there? And why do you carry your keys in your hand? And why don't you go out, and do these things late at night? And just really get an understanding there. I mean, it goes a really long way.
I agree. I think it's difficult for people to understand until they have lived it. Like you spoke about male privilege. I have a lot of people who say that they don't think male privilege is a thing, or they don't believe in loss of male privilege, and then they go through transition and they realize, because they actually experience first offhand the treatment they receive as women and the difference that brings them in terms of their previous life. So absolutely. Now, to end up and to sum it up, where right now, where you at in your life? Where are you looking forward to? What's now? Where are you moving? What is on the horizon for you? What are your plans? What's out there looming for you?
Oh, so honestly, the world feels like it's completely opened up to me in a way that it just never has before. It's the most stable, the most at peace, the happiest I literally have ever been in my life.
Well, you're no
And
longer that pebble on a beach that is
there
being
you
tossed
go.
around, right? You're your own shell now on a beach that has her own placement.
Definitely. And I really love the work that I do right now. I would actually really like to stretch out into, helping trans folks and, working with trans couples and just kind of being peer support with those things. There's a lot of different ideas I have for, ways to help out. I've always been a big believer in community. I
Mm-hmm.
think community is incredibly important. Especially if you're trans, you definitely need to have some trans friends that get what you're going through. But also, I mean, there's a big societal piece here. I think that we're very disconnected from each other. I think we're very
Mm-hmm.
disconnected from the places and the environments that we live in. I think that a big thing for me would be to would be like, shared cooperative housing and cooperative workplaces. And a lot of these things really resonate for me, especially like within the LGBT trans community where, you know, where there's really a need to, be able to move forward in the world. And you can't just do that on your own. That's really difficult
Mm-hmm.
to do. But as a group, we have so much more power and so much more support. And that's really how we're set up. And I would love to move into some of those things now that I feel like I've settled, now that I feel like, like I have so much more of myself to offer the world and to really be useful. And yeah, no, I'm just excited at this point.
I would love to see where you're going to go and what are you going to do. And I'd love to have you back here in any kind of new ventures that you're going to develop and talk about that some more. Thank you, Shannon Simon. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. Simon is absolutely beautiful name. Thank you so much for being part of the interview. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to sit down with me and be so transparent and share so much love and support. And you have such an incredible big heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye.
Bye.